Hi, welcome to my channel. Today, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Elizabeth Penix, and I talk to women who are thinking about becoming a stepmom, or maybe they already are a stepmom, and I give you practical advice on how to step into love because it's never too late to build love for the future. So, one of the questions that I get often asked is why are blended families so challenging, even for smart, capable women? And the answer to that is that smart, capable women think a lot about what they do, and they put a lot of time and planning and thought into it. And emotionally challenging is something that is a little bit outside of the I'm a successful woman lane, because successful women that can use a lot of logic and multitask and do a lot of different things and do it smoothly. When it comes to emotions, we've been trained to shut it all down and do things without emotion. And when you're going to go into a step family, the thicket is dense when it comes to emotions, because emotions are at the forefront of the children's minds, the parents that are entering into this loving relationship or are in this loving relationship, the biological parents and the step parents that are outside of your household. The thicket is so dense when it comes to the emotional issues at play, and it is very daunting. So I think that is why you can expect to be completely overwhelmed, even if you are a very successful and thoughtful woman entering into or being in a step family. So one of the other things that a lot of step parents, potential step parents ask me is, what if the kids don't like me? How can I handle that situation? Is that fear normal? How do I navigate that emotionally? Well, that's incredibly revealing of how you feel about what your role should be. And you feel like your role should be of a loving parent or a step parent, and you're worried that they won't like you. So that's good. I mean, so give yourself kudos for actually caring, because that's a very strong picture of who you are inside. So that's good. And what if they don't like you? A lot of times they will be suspicious, maybe guarded. Maybe they'll welcome you with open arms. It really depends on the age of the children. And more importantly, it depends on how the other parents have approached this topic with them. What have they been told? Who have they heard it from? And has their own emotional state been put in jeopardy by the concept of meeting you? So some of that you should know before meeting them for the first time if you haven't met them yet, and understand, what has been said about you. What do they know about me? Am I meeting them cold? Am I your friend that we're meeting at a restaurant, or how is this working, or how is this going to work? So going in understanding what's been the groundwork that was laid with those children before you met them, I think is important, understanding the context into which you're walking. Like, introduce me to this meeting. Who are we talking to, and what do they know about me? But then that's something that when you do get into that situation, and you can navigate it by keeping yourself centered, making sure you understand that you are a loving person, you are a good person, and you intend to show them only that side of you, because that's really important, especially on a first meeting, is just be open-hearted, open-minded, and do observe, and the things that you say should be kind. And I think that would be a really good start. Obviously every situation is different. So if you're joining a family with older kids, they are probably going to be a little bit more resistant, simply because if they've been through a divorce recently, or maybe they haven't lived with one of their parents and they miss that parent, and they have these incredibly deep relationships with their biological parents, the emotional issues are going to be deeper and thicker. So, a way that I recommend to establish trust with them is to get to know them as if they are young adults in training. Give them the respect of being individuals, of being people that have their own personalities already, they have their own interests, and don't assume that you're going to be able to change them or change their minds, but rather just establish a rapport as if you're meeting them as a friend, because that's the way that teenagers are anyway. And what I've learned with having my own teenagers, now that I have my own biological children, I have multiple stepchildren as well, is that teenagers are supposed to distance themselves from their biological parents naturally anyway. They want to have their own opinions, they want to have their own identity. They want to think the way they think and be different, and that's okay. So even if you were a biological parent, understand that these teenagers are predisposed at a certain age to really want to satisfy themselves and what they think rather than to please a parent. So that's kind of a general statement, and you can go in with the assumption, just get to know them for who they are at that moment and understand that they're still shaping who they are. So ultimately, you want to be a good example to them because maybe one day they'll be a step parent or meeting future stepchildren. So just keep yourself aligned with being a very kind and good human and meet them professionally. I think that kids really respond well to being shown basic respect and being treated like they have very valid things to say and that their thoughts are precious and that they're a unique human that you want to get to know. So that would be my recommendation for that. So I know that one of the things that I struggled with entering into my own step family about 20 years ago was defining my role. And I did not do any of the planning that I like to do with people, the coaching that I provide. I didn't do any of that prior to entering into this situation. And I was ill equipped to figure out what my role was going to be because I had so many assumptions about what my role was going to be as a full custody stepmom versus what the expectations from the other parents were. So I came from a family where we were very well nurtured and aligned. And, I would say my parents were probably a little too strict. And so I came in with my own bag of tools and I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know that these children were very different than what I would have raised my own children to be. And I'd never raised children before. So I came in naive. I came in with my own assumptions. I didn't ask enough questions. I didn't know where I fit except to just assume that I was going to take over nurturing and raising these children as if I were like a full-time mom. So that being said, I had a lot of adjusting to do. And so what I would say for defining your own role as a stepmom, make sure you have that conversation with your partner. Ask them, what do you see my role as being? And then ask yourself, do you want that role? Get really practical. Am I going to be the one waking the kids up in the morning and taking them to school? Is that your role as my partner, or is the other biological parent doing some of that? Like who does what? And this is incredibly practical. Like it's literally a task list. Figure out what your task list is going to be and then compare that with your role. So now the role in my mind is, am I going to be one of the people that they run to? Am I going to be an emergency contact? Am I going to be somebody that helps counsel them through an emotional situation at school perhaps, or maybe they have a friend that starts to make fun of them or is a bully? What is my role going to be? Now that's the bigger like leadership role that I think of. And so having that conversation too, because sometimes there are parents that absolutely don't want the step parent to have that influence or that those conversations. And it all depends on the circumstances. It depends on the other parents. So you have to really understand not only the tasks that you'll be expected to do in support of these of your stepchildren and the family, or what you won't do. That is equally as important, what you won't do, because you have to know what you won't and will not do, what you will not do. And so that's really critical because you don't want to become somebody that is just the maid, and you don't want to lose yourself and you don't want to lose your time. And I talk about that in a lot of other content that I've created because I think it's really critical to hang on to yourself. So make sure you agree to all of this, but at least have the conversation. And then manage the expectations of the other people too. Say, this is what I plan to do. This is what I will help with. So if you need help getting a kid to a medical appointment, let me know. I'll take them. Or if it's the opposite, like don't count on me to be there to pick up the children after school because I have to work until 7 p.m. or I'm traveling all the time. So managing the expectations, but being the communicator is really the safer way to approach this, because somebody has to communicate the standards and the expectations. And if the other people don't already have that established, you could easily become the default parent if you don't define that for yourself and define that for the group. So, all of that being said, it's really, really important to do the practical nitty gritty and get that list put together, which then walks right into another topic that I think is really, really key to nail down before you enter into the home, or even if you're in the home, sit down and have a level set reset about how each parent should parent. And what I mean by that is when a child lies, for example, or if a child steals something, or if a child hurts another one of the children, or maybe you have children that you had brought to the relationship and the stepchildren are not getting along with your own children. How are you going to navigate that? What is your process? So, an example of a process might be, let's me and my partner sit down, we have a conversation. If the kids have a fight, if your kids have a fight with my kids, we're going to sit down, just the two of us, and then we're going to call the children together and we're going to ask each of them what happened, and we're going to give them each a chance to speak equally, and then we will dismiss them, and then we will talk about what we think happened and what we think should happen about that situation. Have a process. That's just an example of a process, but I think it's really critical because when one parent jumps in to protect, say, their child, for example, the other child could feel now that the step parent doesn't like them, that the step parent is playing favorites, and then the biological parent of the other child could feel the same way. And it's really important to align as parents when you have children coming from two different places and two different families. So that would be my recommendation for that. So, there's just a lot of landmines you could step into, a lot of quicksand situations. But if you have the process nailed down, you can absolutely navigate those situations. And then everybody feels heard. And you both, as parents, can sit there and talk through it before you come up with some sort of a knee-jerk reaction. Now, if there's a safety issue, obviously you have to intervene. But if it's just an argument or some kind of a routine fight, there's time to let things cool and to talk through it. And maybe even your process is like, let's deal with it in 2 hours. Let's deal with it tomorrow morning. Let's talk about it and think about it. But do have a process framework in place and communicate that to the kids, because some kids come from a place of, I need you to handle this now. If you really love me, you'll do it now. And they're not in charge. You're in charge. And that's one of the fundamental pieces of being a step parent, is that you're still the parent. The word parent is in there and you're the adult in the room. And so those boundaries and those foundations need to be established in everything that you do. So that would be my recommendation for a process that could work well. So shifting gears a little bit, I know when you enter into a blended family situation, there should be discussions about finances. One of the things about professional women is that they've spent a lot of time and a lot of effort, blood, sweat, and tears, going to school, getting those degrees, or maybe building that business. And maybe there's a very big disparity in the amount of wealth that you bring to a situation. Maybe you have less, maybe he has more, or she has more, or vice versa. And it's dry, but one of the things that you should do right up front as part of your interview process, and I say it that way because this is where a blended family really does feel like a merger of corporations. And I think this resonates with professional women, because if you think about your life and your assets and what you've built, the car that you have, the real estate that you have, if you have it, the inheritance money that you got, the trusts that you have, maybe. And maybe you don't have any of that stuff, but what are the goals that you do have for yourself and for your children? And all of that existed before you decided or thought about joining another family. How can you preserve that and protect it? And then also potentially join forces with your partner to create that for you as a couple, or to create that for your children that you will have together, or for each other's children. And that all depends on the ages and the stages and the relationships between all of the parties. But I really think it's realistic to consider all of it. But individually assess what your portfolio is. What do you have? What are you bringing to the table? And understand what's yours. What are your assets? And then whatever you have, typically in most states, especially if you get married, is yours if you brought it to the marriage. But as soon as you commingle it or use it together to buy a property, then it can become community property or marital property. So it just depends on your jurisdiction. So it's important to look that up for your jurisdiction. Is this inheritance money that is sitting in my bank account only in my name? Does this become my partner's money if I get married? And so look those things up, talk to an attorney. And in my individualized coaching, I can certainly do that for you since I'm an attorney and I've spent a lot of time advising on these topics. But my recommendation is make sure you understand what your assets are. What are your goals for your assets? And then be prepared for the next step of that, which is to have that discussion to talk about the money, the bills, your wills, the trust that you might want to have for your family, and the structures before you make that long-term commitment. Because in a family situation, maybe your partner thinks that once you get married, everything is joint. And if that's their hard line connected to some emotional value that they have, it's valid for some people to think that way. It's completely valid. And so you're going to want to talk through that and understand why they feel that way. And how can you meet that goal somewhat without sacrificing your security? Because if you're anything like me, I enter into every relationship thinking about how is this going to affect me? Because there's nothing worse than walking into a situation where you are going to be the sacrifice. Your future will be the sacrifice. That should not ever be the case. And nor should they sacrifice everything for you. And you shouldn't expect that from anybody, in my opinion. So what I think is the best approach is to talk about the proposition of having that discussion and say to your partner, I would love to sit down and have a bottle of wine or whatever some social sort of light situation, and let's be prepared to talk through our finances, and let's talk about our mutual goals, and let's talk about our individual goals, and then what can we do to meet those goals together, and what do we have to keep separate in order to make that happen for ourselves and for our futures. And this is a really good spot where you could actually sit with a mediator or a coach if you don't feel like you can do this between the two of yourselves. But with a basic checklist that I can provide, you will have a list of the inventory of the things you need to consider, and then the conversation pieces and the decision points you have to reach in order to make an assessment of what are you going to do with that. What am I going to do with my inheritance that I have over here? Will this just be mine? Will this just be for the benefit of my biological children? Or will you and I share this perhaps and go buy a bigger home since we're blending families? So you're going to want to have those detailed discussions because a lot of emotion and a lot of stigma attaches to finances. And when your finances are depleted by joining a family, you're, depending on how you see it and how you deal with it, but you have a lot of potential for real hurt. And it's like, if it's not financial harm, then it's actually maybe just hurt feelings, maybe feeling used, or do you feel shored up? So I think it's really important to have those transparent conversations and be prepared to be honest and agree. Maybe I keep my own individual checking account. You keep yours. We'll each have savings accounts for the children. All of that can be separate. And maybe we have a joint account for our shared bills, or maybe we have a joint account for the shared vacation budgeting that we're going to do. Maybe we invest in something together, but there are a lot of ways to do this together and in a cohesive way without causing hurt feelings. But getting on the same page before you intermingle those funds is a lot easier than separating funds and separating bank accounts after you've seen that that doesn't work. Now, you still should and you still could, but it is a lot harder and it can cause a lot more reverberation, if you will. So just a pro tip, get all that figured out beforehand, get your process figured out for how you're going to blend your money, how you're going to share your expenses, and then go from there. So I want to also talk about your well-being, because when you're in a marriage that has children, or if you're in a partnership, don't have to be married, but you have children that are not of your origin in your home, and you're a good person, you're going to feel like they're your children. There's no separation. If something were to happen to them, you're not going to listen to them screaming in the living room and think, well, that's not my child, so I'm not going to go help. That's not how it works. So practically speaking, you're going to be a parent to more children. That's just all there is to it. If you're a loving human, that's what's going to happen while they're in your home. And even while they're not in your home, you're going to worry about them. Are they safe? Are they, did they get on that flight? You're just going to be invested. That's just, accept that. There's no separation when it comes to your heart. And that is a fact of a loving parent. So kudos for having that position in your mind. But then how do you not lose your own identity when the size of your family just doubled? Your responsibilities might have doubled. Maybe now you're responsible for children and you don't even have biological children of your own, but these are your children in your heart and your mind. And you have somebody saying those aren't your children. Well, that doesn't change the fact that I still care about them. It doesn't change the fact that I'm still a human being that no longer has time to go to the gym, because now I'm making dinner every night and doing homework with the children. So what you need to do is really find, like we did with your finances, is find what is yours. What is yours that you're not willing to let go of? Is there a hobby? Is there a time that you go walking and you listen to music or a podcast? Is there a gym routine that you have to have for your what did you do before you had the step family that kept you grounded, that kept you sane? And hang on to that in some way. Find the thing that kept you sane and protect it, because you will need that more than ever. And if you lose that, you will begin to lose or feel like you've lost part of yourself. So that's a pro tip right up front for protecting your time more than ever. Because when you blend families, and maybe it'll be easier, because maybe your own children will be off with their other parent, and maybe your partner's children will be off with the other parent, and you'll have more time. And if that works, then that's where you can do that protected activity. But make sure that you protect it, because it's so easy to lose your identity and become somebody else entirely and lose the pieces of you that you really needed to hang on to. Now, this isn't to say that changing is bad, because changing your identity is certainly good if it's on your terms and if it works out for the benefit of you and the family. So make sure you keep that for yourself. And overnight, absolutely, you're going to want to fix everything. You're going to see the things that you think are wrong. You're going to see the things that you think the children should be doing from the other relationship. And you're going to want to fix everything overnight. You have to resist that urge. And, obviously, again, if it's a safety issue, then yes, fix it immediately. One of the things that was interesting in my situation is that there were some things that I thought needed to change. Like, I don't believe that children should have TVs in their bedroom. I don't think that they should have the opportunity to just lay there and watch TV forever. I think they should get up. I think they should play with something in their room, leave perhaps. So anyway, without my husband's knowledge or permission, really, because he was deployed, I took the TVs out of the children's bedrooms, and that caused a bit of a kerfluffle, because that was their routine. They were used to coming home from school, watching a little bit of TV, then doing their chores, and I just had a very strong opinion against it. Nothing got hurt, obviously, but that's one of those situations where when I talked to my husband about it at the next time that we talked, because again, he was deployed, he said, well, that was my gift to them the last time I deployed, because I wanted them to be able to have that comfortable experience. And so not only did I take the TVs out of their rooms, but I had also removed sort of a piece of his gift to them without really thinking through that piece of it. So I think it's really important to communicate with your partner about the things that you think are wrong, the things that you want to change, the things you want to fix, and just communicate that. And, chances are you will agree on something. And if it's really a mat issue, like I got to go to the mat over this, then figure out why. Check in with yourself and figure out, why do I feel so strongly about this? And there's a lot of good reasons. So it'll reveal more about you to your partner, and you'll have that conversation, and then ultimately solve the problem together and in a unified way. So that would be my recommendation for that. So in closing, today, those were just a few of the topics I wanted to talk about. But if you are on the fence right now and you're one of those women that is thinking about what they can do to get some more clarity around this decision, I would recommend you sit down and you think about, what do you see with this partner and with these specific children? What do you see in a year? What do you see you doing together? Do you feel happiness and joy? Do you feel love? What do you imagine in 5 years? What do you imagine in 20 years? Can you see that? Because if you can see a future with them that has happiness and joy, and you imagine it, that means it's in there and you've got the excitement about it. It means that it's possible. And if you look at this future and you think dread and you think, oh no, I can't do it, then you really need to be honest with yourself about the situation. Because if you go in with a predisposition and with dread, not only is that your body and your mind talking to you about what you should be paying attention to, but is that just nervousness? Is that fear, or is that actual dread? And so my recommendation is sit down and write down your answers to those questions. What do I see happening in a year with this family, specifically with them? What are we doing together? What about 2 years from now? What about 10 years from now? And visualize that and think about it. And then at the end of the day, do I feel happiness and joy when I think about these things? And if the answer is yes, I think you have a really great chance of success. So that's just some food for thought for the day. And just subscribe, like my content, share it with a friend who might be a step parent or considering becoming a stepmom. And more practical tips always coming from Step Into Love. Thank you.